God is already handling it. Stop overthinking. There are moments in life when your mind becomes the battlefield, not because the world is against you, but because your thoughts won't let you rest long enough to see what God is already doing. You lie awake, replaying every possibility, carrying the weight of outcomes you were never meant to carry, stressing over doors that God has already unlocked, and worrying about situations that heaven has already settled. You are exhausting yourself trying to solve what God has already worked out behind the scenes. Overthinking convinces you that everything depends on you, your timing, your decisions, your strength, your effort. But there is a point where your thoughts must bow to your faith. There is a moment when you must release the illusion of control and trust the one who has never failed you. God is not asking you to fix it. God is not asking you to figure it out. God is asking you to trust that He is already in the details, already in the solution, already in the outcome. Some of you are wrestling with scenarios that will never happen. You're building mountains out of moments. You're creating battles that don't exist. The enemy doesn't always attack your surroundings. Sometimes he attacks your thoughts. If he can get you tangled in fear, trapped in doubt, or stuck in anxiety, he doesn't need to touch anything else. If he can make you believe that you must carry everything alone, he can keep you from seeing what God is carrying for you. But hear this, God works in ways your mind cannot comprehend. While you worry, He is working. While you stress, He is shifting. While you overthink, He is overturning obstacles you don't even know about. You think nothing is happening, but God is building the blessing behind the curtain of your uncertainty. You think you're stuck, but God is setting the stage for a breakthrough you didn't see coming. You think you're alone, but God is surrounding you with protection, grace, and favor
that overthinking has blinded you from noticing.
There are doors God will open only when you stop trying to control the hinges. There are miracles that manifest only when you quiet your mind long enough to receive them. You cannot overthink your way into peace. You can only trust your way into it. Peace is not found in perfect understanding. It is found in perfect surrender. Sometimes the loudest thing in your life is not the problem. It is the noise in your mind telling you the problem is bigger than God. Let your spirit rise above the storm inside your thoughts. God has already gone ahead of you. He has already aligned conversations, prepared opportunities, softened hearts, and set divine appointments. What you see as chaos, He sees as construction. What you see as delay, He sees as development. What you see as uncertainty, He sees as preparation. There is no detail too small for Him, no burden too heavy, no situation too complicated. He is not overwhelmed by what overwhelms you. Stop replaying every worry. Stop magnifying every fear. Stop assuming the worst when God is preparing the best. Let go of the what ifs and hold on to the God who has never left you stranded. You are not walking into this next season alone. You are not stepping into the unknown without guidance. You are not facing battles without backup. God is already in the outcome, waiting for your faith to catch up. So breathe. Release the pressure you placed on yourself. You do not have to carry what God has already lifted. You do not have to stress over what God has already settled. You do not have to figure out what God has already finished. Trust Him with what you can't see. Trust Him with what doesn't make sense yet. Trust Him with the questions your mind cannot answer. God is already handling it. Your job is simply to stop overthinking long enough to see His hand at work. Quiet your mind before you miss your miracle. There is a kind of noise that doesn't come from the outside world, but rises from within. Noise made of doubts, fears,
Conversations you've had with yourself 1,000 times.
arguments you rehearse, outcomes you try to control, and catastrophes you imagine long before they ever have a chance to appear. This noise becomes so loud that even when God is whispering direction, assurance, or clarity, you can't hear Him through the clutter. You find yourself standing in the doorway of the very thing you prayed for, but the anxiety in your mind convinces you that you aren't ready, you aren't worthy, or you aren't enough. A miracle is not always loud. It doesn't always announce itself with bright lights or thunderous signs. Sometimes your miracle approaches quietly, like early morning sunlight slipping through the blinds. It can be subtle, gentle, almost ordinary. And if your mind is full of chaos, you will overlook what heaven has placed in front of you. You can be praying for an open door while overthinking so much that you talk yourself out of walking through it. You can be asking for a breakthrough while analyzing every risk until you convince yourself to stay where you are. You can be begging God to shift your life while drowning in thoughts that keep you tied to old versions of yourself. Your miracle requires awareness, not anxiety. It requires spiritual sensitivity, not mental strain. When your thoughts are racing, you start predicting failure instead of expecting favor. You magnify problems instead of recognizing possibilities. You get so caught up in the what ifs that you lose sight of the God will. Overthinking creates fog. It blinds you to direction and blurs your vision of what God is doing behind the scenes. And while God is not the author of confusion, the enemy thrives in it. He knows he doesn't have to destroy you if he can distract you. If he can keep your mind busy enough, he can keep your spirit too tired to receive what's been prepared for you. There are moments when God sends opportunities that require peace to perceive. You cannot hear divine instruction in a storm of your own thoughts.
You cannot discern miracles with a mind full of noise.
When your spirit is restless, you grab hold of the wrong things. You say yes to burdens you were never meant to carry. You chase answers that God never told you to pursue. You align with people who drain you instead of uplift you. A noisy mind leads to misplaced decisions, and misplaced decisions delay miracles. Not because God withdraws them, but because you can't recognize them when they arrive. Quieting your mind is an act of spiritual obedience. It is a declaration that you trust God more than your predictions, your fears, or your imagined scenarios. It is choosing to believe that you don't need all the details to walk into destiny. It is giving yourself permission to stop replaying every wound, every mistake, every missed moment from your past. When you silence the internal chatter, you create room for clarity. You make space for God to speak to you in ways you couldn't perceive before. Peace becomes not just the absence of noise, but the presence of divine direction. Your miracle might already be unfolding. Doors may already be swinging open. Answers may already be on their way. But if your mind is racing, you won't recognize the shift. You'll be too distracted by the storm inside you to notice the calm God is creating around you. You'll be so focused on what could go wrong that you fail to see what is going right. You'll be so busy trying to control every outcome that you miss the blessing of simply receiving what God has already settled. Quiet your mind so you can feel the nudging, hear the guidance, sense the timing, and perceive the blessing. Quiet your mind so you can stop overthinking and start obeying. Quiet your mind so your heart can catch up with what God is doing. Quiet your mind so your faith can rise above your fear. Quiet your mind so you can recognize the miracle that may be standing right in front of you, waiting for you to notice it. Your thoughts are gatekeepers. Every idea, emotion, and possibility in your life must pass through the doorway of your mind before it becomes action, behavior, or belief. The mind is not just a place where thoughts appear. It is a gate that decides what enters, what stays, and what gets dismissed. If the wrong thoughts become gatekeepers, they will block blessings, deny opportunities, and shut out peace. If the right thoughts take their place, they will open doors to growth, healing, and purpose. Your entire life shifts depending on which thoughts you permit to stand at the gate. Most people do not lose battles in the physical world. They lose them in the invisible battleground of the mind. What you dwell on becomes what you expect. What you expect becomes what you prepare for. What you prepare for becomes what you step into. If fear is guarding your gate, then everything you interpret will be filtered through insecurity. You will see possibilities as threats, relationships as risks, and blessings as burdens. Fear will turn you away from opportunities because it whispers that you are not enough. It will blind you to God's provision and convince you that scarcity is your reality, even when abundance surrounds you. If doubt stands at the gate, it will challenge every good thing that tries to enter your life. Doubt doesn't need evidence, it only needs space. It questions every open door, every answered prayer, every moment of favor. It tells you to wait when God says move, to hesitate when God says go, to shrink when destiny requires you to stretch. Doubt blocks miracles because it plants suspicion where God is planting faith. And when doubt becomes the gatekeeper, you can receive blessings and still reject them because your mind cannot accept what your heart is asking for. If negativity guards the gate, it becomes a filter that distorts reality. You begin to expect disappointment. You rehearse worst case scenarios. You assume the motives of others are harmful. You sabotage yourself before life even has a chance to bless you. Negativity closes the gate to joy, peace, opportunity, and growth. It tells you that nothing will change, so why try? It tells you that the past will repeat itself, so why hope? It tells you that you are stuck, so why believe? And because the gatekeeper determines access, negativity becomes a prison guard that restricts everything God wants to release in your life. But just as negative thoughts can close the gate, faith-filled thoughts can open it. When faith stands at the gate, it welcomes what aligns with your purpose. It recognizes God's hand in small moments. It expects goodness even in uncertainty. Faith interprets challenges as preparation, setbacks as pruning, and delays as divine timing. Faith doesn't deny reality. It expands it. It sees beyond what is visible and gives you the courage to move toward what is possible. With faith guarding your gate, you walk into rooms you once felt unworthy of and embrace opportunities you used to fear. When gratitude guards the gate, it shifts the atmosphere of your mind. It teaches you to recognize blessings that others overlook. Gratitude filters out entitlement, comparison, and bitterness. It protects your joy by reminding you that even on difficult days, God is still present and still working. Gratitude opens the gate for more because what you appreciate makes room for multiplication. It trains your thoughts to see life, not through the lens of lack, but through the lens of provision. When wisdom stands at the gate, it becomes a protector of your peace. Wisdom doesn't let every voice influence you, every emotion guide you, or every impulse control you. It filters out what doesn't align with your growth. It guards your decisions, your relationships, and your purpose. Wisdom helps you recognize what is from God and what is merely a distraction. With wisdom at the gate, you stop letting temporary emotions make permanent decisions. Your mind is a gate, and every day you choose who stands guard. You choose whether fear, doubt, anxiety, and negativity have the authority to shape your perspective. You choose whether faith, gratitude, and wisdom have the authority to shape your direction. You choose whether old wounds or renewed strength have the right to determine what enters your life. You choose what you entertain, what you release, and what you allow to influence your spirit. Overthinking is a form of distrust. It is the silent signal that you have taken the weight of life into your own hands and are trying to control what was never meant to be carried by human strength alone. Overthinking is not simply thinking too much. It is thinking from a place of fear rather than faith. It is rehearsing every possible failure because you do not fully believe that God is orchestrating. a path that does not end in disaster. It is imagining every worst case scenario because trust feels too risky and surrender feels too vulnerable. Overthinking is the mind's attempt to feel safe, yet it ends up making you more exhausted, more anxious, and more disconnected from the peace God has already offered you. When you overthink, you begin to lean on your own understanding. You try to analyze your way into clarity, predict your way into security, and solve your way into peace. But peace does not come from knowing every detail. It comes from trusting the one who does. Overthinking convinces you that if you can just think hard enough, plan far enough, or anticipate every twist and turn, you can avoid disappointment. But the truth is that overthinking doesn't prevent heartbreak, it accelerates it. It does not protect you from pain, it prolongs it. It does not guard your heart, it drains it. And deep beneath the layers of questions, anxiety, and mental replaying is the quiet confession. I don't trust that things will work out unless I figure out how to make them work. There are people who pray for guidance but never stop planning long enough to listen. They ask for peace but refuse to release control. They beg for direction but are too busy analyzing the map to follow the voice of the one who created the path. Overthinking becomes a barrier between you and divine intervention. It becomes a wall that blocks the flow of faith. You cannot fully receive what you do not fully trust. You cannot walk boldly into your future while rehearsing every possible threat from your past. You cannot claim God's promises while simultaneously preparing for failure. Overthinking is not simply a habit. It is a sign that your heart is struggling to rest in what God has already spoken. Overthinking is rooted in past wounds. When you've been hurt, betrayed, rejected, or blindsided, the mind tries to prepare for anything that resembles what you survived. It becomes a self-protective reflex. You start believing that if you anticipate the worst, you can soften the blow. But all this does is rob the present of its joy and the future of its hope. Overthinking keeps you tied to the pain of yesterday while blinding you to the possibilities of tomorrow. It convinces you that your trauma is more powerful than God's promises. And as long as you feed those thoughts, distrust grows quietly in the background. But at its core, overthinking is not about intelligence or caution. It is about control. It is the belief that outcomes depend on your ability to manage, predict, and plan everything perfectly. It is forgetting that there is a God who sees the whole picture while you only see fragments. When you trust God, you release the illusion that you must have all the answers. When you trust God, you stop living in mental tension as if every burden rests on your shoulders. When you trust God, you shift from what if it goes wrong to what if God comes through stronger than I expect. Trust does not mean shutting off your mind. It means redirecting it. It means training your thoughts to lean toward faith instead of fear. It means acknowledging the uncertainty without surrendering to it. It means reminding yourself that you do not walk alone and you do not decide your life by mental calculations. Trust is the antidote to overthinking. Trust is the release that unlocks peace. Trust is the surrender that makes room for miracles. Overthinking will convince you that preparing for the worst is wisdom. But real wisdom is knowing when to let go. It is knowing when to stop replaying conversations, stop analyzing motives, stop predicting outcomes, and stop carrying battles that belong to God. Overthinking drains, but trust restores. Overthinking paralyzes, but trust propels. Overthinking isolates, but trust connects you to divine strength. Each time you choose trust over mental turmoil, you reclaim a part of yourself that anxiety tried to steal. Surrender is a strategy. It is not weakness, not passivity, not giving up on life. It is the conscious decision to release what was never meant to be controlled by human hands. Surrender is the wisdom of recognizing that your strength has limits, your understanding has boundaries, and your abilities have ceilings. It is the moment when your spirit admits that you cannot carry everything, fix everything, or foresee everything, and that admitting this is not failure but freedom. Surrender is a strategy because it positions you to receive what self-reliance could never produce. It opens doors that force won't open, softens hearts that pressure won't change, and brings outcomes that anxiety can't manufacture. Most people are conditioned to push harder when life feels heavy. They try to think their way out, hustle their way out, fight their way through every barrier, only to find themselves more depleted and more overwhelmed. The world teaches that control is power, but the Spirit knows that release is greater. There are situations where no amount of effort will shift the outcome. No amount of planning will guarantee the path, and no amount of worry will create a solution. These are the moments when surrender becomes a divine strategy. It is the bridge between human limitation and supernatural intervention. When your strength reaches its end, surrender becomes the doorway through which God begins to move. Surrender is not abandoning responsibility. It is abandoning the illusion of control. It is understanding that you are responsible for obedience, not outcomes.
You are responsible for steps, not seasons. You are responsible for effort, not the entire unfolding of destiny.
When you surrender, you let go of the burden to make everything align perfectly, and you trust that what is meant for you will not require manipulation to sustain. You stop forcing timelines, stop chasing validation, stop clinging to people who are not assigned to your future, and stop fighting battles that drain you more than they develop you. Surrender becomes the strategy that protects your peace while allowing God to orchestrate what you cannot see. There's a deep power in acknowledging that you do not have all the answers. When you surrender, you silence the noise of overthinking. You release the grip of fear. You stop rehearsing past wounds and expecting new pain. You stop trying to predict every twist in the road. Surrender shifts your posture from striving to trusting. It frees the mind and lightens the heart. It teaches you that rest is not the absence of work, but the presence of faith. Surrendering is not about doing less. It is about relying more on the one who sees the full picture. Some breakthroughs only come after surrender. Some healing only happens when you stop trying to mend yourself alone. Some answers only arrive when you stop pushing for clarity and allow time, grace, and divine timing to reveal what you've been straining to understand. There are seasons where surrender becomes the turning point. You can fight and wrestle and resist, but the moment you release the need to control, peace begins to flow where pressure once lived. Surrender clears the pathway for miracles because it shifts the outcome from your hands to God's hands, and His hands never fail. Surrender is also a strategy for relationships. Holding on too tightly can suffocate what was meant to grow. Trying to control others creates tension where love should live. Trying to force people to stay creates pain where connection should flourish. When you surrender, you allow what is true to remain, what is growing to strengthen, and what is misaligned to fall away naturally. Surrender creates space for authenticity, balance, and emotional clarity. It teaches you that letting go is sometimes the act of honoring your worth, not diminishing it. Surrender is a strategy for purpose. Sometimes you want answers before you move, clarity before you trust, assurance before you step out. But surrender teaches you that you don't need the entire map to take the first step. You don't need the whole plan to follow the nudge. You don't need to see the finish line to begin. When you surrender, you stop delaying your purpose out of fear of the unknown. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop trying to predict every outcome. Surrender becomes the catalyst that propels you forward. In surrender, there is strength. In surrender, there is clarity. In surrender, there is alignment. It is the strategy that transforms chaos into peace, pressure into trust, and uncertainty into possibility. Speak life to your mind. Your thoughts are not just background noise, they are the architects shaping the world you experience. Every word you silently whisper to yourself either builds you up or breaks you down. The mind listens, absorbs, and repeats whatever you feed it. If you constantly speak fear, your mind will live in survival mode. If you speak doubt, your mind will shrink from opportunities. If you speak negativity, your mind will filter life through a lens of defeat. But when you speak life, your mind becomes fertile ground for strength, hope, and transformation. Speaking life is not about pretending problems don't exist. It is about refusing to let your thoughts bow to them. There are moments when your mind becomes your greatest critic, echoing the voices of past failures, old memories, hurtful words, and internal fears. These echoes grow louder when you're tired, vulnerable, or transitioning into a new season. The mind thrives on repetition, so whatever you repeat becomes what you believe. If you replay your mistakes, you'll start believing you're incapable. You rehearse your insecurities, you'll start believing you're unworthy. If you replay rejection, you'll start believing you're unwanted. But just as negativity can take root through repetition, so can truth, faith, and encouragement. Speaking life is the spiritual discipline of forming intentional internal conversations that align with who you are becoming, not who you were. Some people wait for confidence to appear before they speak life, but confidence is often born from the words you speak long before you feel them. When you tell your mind, I can handle this, your mind begins shifting from panic to preparation. When you say, I am growing, your mind stops focusing on what's missing and starts focusing on progress. When you declare, I am loved, your mind stops amplifying rejection and starts embracing worth. Speaking life is not self-deception, it is self-alignment. It is speaking to the part of you that is rising, even when the part of you that is hurting is louder. Your mind needs direction, not permission. If you do not guide it intentionally, it will wander through old wounds, fears, and anxieties. It will drift toward familiar pain instead of unfamiliar growth. It will cling to what hurt you rather than reach for what heals you. Speaking life reroutes the mental pathways that have been shaped by years of internal battles. It interrupts the cycle of overthinking. It rewrites narratives you accepted in moments of weakness. It reclaims territory that anxiety tried to occupy. Every word you speak to yourself is either planting weeds or planting seeds. There is power in telling your mind, you are not in charge of my destiny. Anxiety may rise, but you can speak life and tell it, you do not dictate my future. Fear may flare up, but you can speak life and say, you will not decide my decisions. The inner critic may whisper old accusations, but you can speak life and declare, I am being renewed. Speaking life sets boundaries with your own thoughts. It says, I hear you, but I don't obey you. I feel you, but I won't follow you. Your mind will believe the loudest voice. If the loudest voice is fear, fear becomes your reality. If the loudest voice is faith, faith becomes your foundation. Speaking life is choosing which voice becomes dominant. It is catching destructive thoughts before they take root. It is interrupting lies with truth. It is replacing shame with grace. It is reminding yourself that growth is possible, that healing is real, that change is within reach, even when circumstances try to convince you otherwise. Sometimes you must speak life even when you don't see progress. You speak life while you're still healing. You speak life while you're waiting. You speak life while you're unsure. You speak life while you're rebuilding. Consistency creates transformation. The more you speak it, the more your mind shapes itself around it. The more your mind shapes itself around it, the more your life begins to reflect it. Speaking life is also an act of spiritual warfare. It is recognizing that your mind is often the first place battles begin. When you speak life, you resist the patterns that held you back for years. You resist the temptation to agree with discouragement. You resist the pull toward hopelessness. You resist the old mental scripts that try to replay themselves on repeat. Speaking life shifts you from reacting to life to directing your inner world. Your mind is listening to everything you say about yourself. So speak life until peace becomes your normal. Speak life till confidence grows roots. Speak life until your thoughts align with truth. Speak life until your mind becomes a place where hope can breathe again. God works while you rest. There is a divine rhythm woven into creation, a rhythm that invites you to stop striving long enough for God to do what only God can do. Rest is not laziness, it is trust in action. It is the acknowledgement that your human effort has limits, but God's power does not. When you rest, you aren't quitting. You are shifting the responsibility from your shoulders to the one who can carry the weight without strain. You are stepping out of the illusion that everything depends on your strength and stepping into the truth that God is already moving, already aligning, already orchestrating what you cannot see. Many people live life believing that constant motion equals progress. They stretch themselves thin, push beyond exhaustion, and think that if they slow down, everything will fall apart. But sometimes your need to stay busy is a sign that you don't believe God is working unless you are. You fear stillness because you equate rest with vulnerability or losing control. But rest is not losing control. It is surrendering control to God. It is trusting that the world will not collapse simply because you pause to breathe. It is admitting that you are not the one holding your life together. God is. God often does his greatest work when you stop trying to force outcomes. When you are resting, he is rearranging circumstances. When you are sleeping, he is shifting hearts, opening opportunities, and closing doors that were never meant to be walked through. While you rest, God is repairing what was broken in ways your hands could never accomplish. Rest allows God's timing to unfold without interference from your anxiety. Rest says, I don't have to manipulate this. I don't have to chase what is not mine. I don't have to be everywhere at once. God is covering what I cannot. There are battles you were never meant to fight. There are answers you were never meant to figure out. There are outcomes you were never meant to control. Rest becomes the strategy that allows you to experience the supernatural while releasing the exhaustion of self-reliance. When you rest, you make room for wisdom to rise, for clarity to settle, and for burdens to lift. Overthinking cannot produce the breakthrough you are praying for, but rest can create the atmosphere where God can move freely without resistance from fear-filled thoughts. Rest is deeply spiritual. It quiets the noise of your worries so you can hear God's voice more clearly. It lowers the volume of your doubts so faith can breathe again. Rest does not remove responsibility, it repositions it. It says, God, I've done what I can. Now I trust you to do what I cannot. It is the moment when your heart stops striving and starts believing. Rest is not inactivity, it is active trust. It is aligning your spirit with the truth that God is not limited by deadlines, obstacles, delays, or the ticking clock that makes you anxious. Some of the greatest transformations happen in seasons of rest. Healing takes root when you are still long enough for your heart to process pain. Growth happens when you pause long enough for your inner world to catch up with your outer world. Direction becomes clearer when you stop running long enough to listen. Rest allows you to let go of what is draining you so God can refill what life has emptied. You cannot pour from an empty vessel, and you cannot discern clearly when you are mentally overcrowded. Rest is God's way of renewing your strength for the journey ahead. God works in unseen places. He works in silence, in stillness, in the gaps between your prayers and your answers. He works while you are unaware, while you are taking care of other responsibilities, while you are nurturing your spirit, while you are recovering from seasons of disappointment. God does not need your constant motion to accomplish his will. He simply needs your trust. Rest is the evidence of that trust. It is the internal declaration that you believe God is faithful even when you cannot track his movements. Rest is a reminder that you are held. It is a reminder that God is not asleep even when you are. He neither slumbers nor grows weary. He watches over you, guides you, protects you, and prepares what is next. Rest becomes the sacred space where God's hands continue working on your behalf without the interference of stress, fear, and striving.